Today, we are really excited to bring you our first Ask Me Anything. We've compiled some questions that were sent in to us over the past couple of days, and then we're also going to be answering your questions that you bring to the table. The person going to be answering all these questions is Tomas. He is our Chief Solutions Architect, and he applies his legal, technical, and business acumen to achieve workflow automation requirements for clients. He leads the sales engineering team, and I know that he is very, very, very excited about answering your questions today. So without further ado, here is Tomas.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I just want to do a quick agenda overview of what we'll cover. So we've handled the introduction, and we'll jump right in because I know our time is limited. So there are a number of questions that were submitted online. I'll start with those, and that'll be the first part of our presentation today, the webinar. And next, we'll have questions that were submitted during the webinar. So there is, in the control panel that you have for this webinar, there's an easy chat box. So never hesitate to enter questions. And what I've done is I've taken the questions that were submitted online and I've grouped them or organized them. Many of them had to do with kind of permissions and kind of authentication controls. So I'll start with that, and then we'll transition over to functionality, specifically how do I X, Y, Z in AbacusLaw in the most efficient way. And you'll notice as I cover some of these questions that there are oftentimes more than one way to perform a function. So when there are questions that have, or there's an opportunity for me to show you multiple ways of achieving the same result, I will focus on that. I think sometimes it's helpful because you can pick and choose the method that either you prefer or simply most efficient. But with that said, I think I will jump right in to the Abacus program. So the first question, or the first group of questions, have to do with permissions, and specifically how, on a user-by-user basis within the program, you can grant or restrict access to information, right? The real goal is individuals have tools they need to access the information they need, and then they can perform their steps, and going forward, with the accounting portion, they can bill, they can certainly track time and have access to information. So that started. The first question, this is an interesting one, is there a way to protect a matter or name field once it's been entered, right? So the concept is access to the information, but that information should be protected, meaning it is, it's maybe read-only, right? That was my take on the protection request. So I pulled up a name record here that I've designed a couple of fields. So you'll notice in the security view options section, information entered into the data field in Abacus, in most instances, is available to read, write, meaning you can edit and modify it. However, that same information can be displayed in a number of different formats. The next one is the same, data, but it's presented as a read-only, display. That's one way that within the Abacus program, you can have the same information actually be viewed or, controlled or modified in a very different way. Understanding that this same data field on my screen could be read and write, and maybe that same data field on the screen that is assigned to others within the firm would be read-only. And then also partial read-only would be something where, for privileged or confidential information or an SSN or something like that, you have the ability to control how the data is displayed. So it's kind of, I broke it down into kind of read and write, which is full kind of modification. Protected, one aspect of that is read-only, and finally partial read-only. So that's something that is available, this type of control and protections for data in the Abacus system, and on a user-by-user basis, the type of screen that is available to that individual can have these kind of permissions or protections built in. Now, a couple other things, other ways, let's say, that you could protect information. One, there's the ethical wall feature within Abacus, which enables you to grant or restrict access to entire records. So that if Allison logs in, she could see the Smith file. If I logged in, the Smith file simply would not be part of any of the browsers or lists that view information in the program. Now, the specific question was about a field, protecting a field, and this is really a specific way to do that. If we broaden that out, can protect individual records by making them, accessible or not. That's another way that you can kind of enforce protections or protect information. And then the final one is in kind of the security profile. So if you wanted to create a profile and assign it to an individual in the firm, that profile can basically make their access of the program read-only across the board. So, that's going outside of the scope of the original question. But I wanted to kind of build on that concept where you can actually have individual users prohibited from making modifications to any field that they access from the program. You can actually protect individual fields, and you can certainly protect individual records like a matter as a whole, whether that is displayed or not on a user-by-user basis. All right. So that's the first question I wanted to answer. It had to do specifically with protecting a field once it's been entered. And a useful scenario may be that in the intake form in Abacus, you would enter information into that field, but once that field, or once the information, is displayed, it could be read-only immediately. So that's another way where, the modification actually happens when data is entered in that field, at the first instance, and then going forward, these permissions can be applied. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one also has to do with permissions, and it is specifically within the accounting side of things, and it has to do, and the question is there a way to protect or enforce, apply privacy settings so that not everyone in the firm views totals? Really? So I think that the question or the underlying request there is use a system so that timekeepers, individuals who are performing work and tracking their time in the system, have that functionality, right? So that you can use your notes or your events in the calendar, or for documents and emails in a very flexible and efficient way, track time and bill for it. However, in the accounting side of things, I'll jump over there quickly to show you, if I'm looking at my time tickets browse, there are totals. So number of total tickets, total billable hours, amounts, and whatnot. So that I believe this is the information that the person asking the question doesn't want everyone in the firm to basically have access to. So there are a couple ways to do that. In the AbacusLaw program, if you click on time tickets, it is a similar view of that browse, but I'm going to move back 1 month here. This is where you see similar information without the totals and whatnot. So if you're using the time tickets browse and you grant access to this on an individual basis, those timekeepers can see their totals and totals by matter or by other time, or I'm sorry, they can show their more specific time tickets, but not necessarily the overall total, either the number of hours, the number of tickets, or the total value of those tickets. So the time ticket browse in the case management side of Abacus is certainly a way to encourage users to be able to look at all time tickets by date range or by timekeeper or by case, but also not have those totals. That's the first one I want to touch on. The second one, or the second option, is to go in and show you the user manager, because the user manager is your way of really controlling at a very granular level the access of each individual in the program. So at a high level, you can grant or restrict access to the case management tools and the accounting tools. So I could disable all access to accounting tools, but I can also go in, click security profile here, select this type of permission. I want to show you where I can go into accounting permissions here and select time, costs, and adjustments, let's say. This is where I can actually disable an individual's view of rates and values for time tickets. So there are a number of different ways to do it. One would be kind of a high-level restriction in accessing the accounting, but if you'd rather have more specific or granular controls, working with the security profile for each user, and specifically that profile's access within accounting, you can really come in and grant or restrict access to individual tickets, the details of a ticket, and the rate and value of a ticket. So that's the other way that you can have, in essence, the control over that type of information. All right. Moving on, there was a further question about accounting, and it really went to the functionality, where there was a request for view of previously posted costs and adjustments. I think an easy way to do that is under billing. I can go to a matter billing activity display, And for a specific matter, I can see previously posted, case, I can see previously posted costs and adjustments. So on a matter billing detail, under billing in accounting is where I can see those previously posted costs and adjustments. Okay, and then whether it's a debit or a credit is also broken out. So that would be a nice way, I think, for you to have that visibility that you were looking for. And bear with me, I'm going to bounce around a bit just because the questions were great and they really, they were focused on kind of specific ways, but not, consistent areas of the program. So first thing I wanted to touch on is import, because the question was, how do I set up a clipboard so I can import information into a name record? And if I go to names, I can click add a new name. We're all familiar with that. That's the way that we would, create a name record. But I also wanted to point out this add from clipboard function. And this is handy because I can take an incoming email with information in it, and I can actually copy it. So John Wilson is a new name record. Let's say I copy that. In the Abacus program, if I go to names, add from a clipboard, it will actually look at my clipboard. And let's say I wanted to create a client record. Click done here. It knows this information came from that email address. But the pasting assistant says, okay, here's the raw text, and here's where information, as prepared, will go into the Abacus name record. So Wilson, John, the client, any other changes I might want to make are pretty straightforward in the program. But by doing that, I've taken, information that came in via, it could be in a Word document, it could be in an email. The good thing is when you when you copy that information into the clipboard, Abacus will actually identify it and using some, some smart code, parse out the information and help you populate the specific and accurate fields in a name record. That was one question about how can I kind of do that? How can I paste or create new name records with information that I just received in electronic format? I want to show you that as a starting point, the first example. Also, there was the question about importing from a vCard. And that's where I'm going to move to File, Utilities, and Import. Because in the import tools built into Abacus is the ability to pull information from a vCard. So if you are receiving, from opposing counsel or client or whoever might send you that contact information in the vCard format, there is a utility built directly into Abacus, and that's probably your easiest way to, maximize or optimize your use of a vCard. That's, I think it's a VCF file, but that's a nice way of importing from a vCard, as well as an ICS. So if maybe you receive a calendar invite or a meeting invite via Outlook, you also have the ability to bring in an ICS file. So there are utilities built into Abacus that recognize the format of those files, and it's a nice clean way to get that information into your Abacus system so it then becomes useful. Okay. And while we're here, I might as well touch on some other ways. So if you're coming in from Outlook or some other incoming file format, the other section here is another way for you to create, or working with our team here, never hesitate to call and ask us questions. We can help you create import templates. And I've worked with a number of different clients, and what their need was, they oftentimes receive, let's say, 200 cases at once from a client. Maybe it's an insurance company. But that high volume of incoming cases, oftentimes what they do is they receive a spreadsheet with that information. So what we can work with you to do is to create an import template that anticipates the format and the data that would come in a spreadsheet. The advantage is you start with that template, you import data into name, matter, records in Abacus without needing to retype or copy and paste. It's a good way to have like a batch import of file information. So I wanted to kind of touch on that because it was a good way of kind of exploring some of the utilities that are, that maybe if you're not familiar with them, it's worth exploring because it's a powerful way to automate how you bring information, accurate, clean, and efficient information data into your Abacus system. Okay. A next question that I liked was, and if we're following kind of the import theme, was how can I integrate the intake functionality into my website, right? So a page on my website. So imagine if a contact form, something that you use regularly to create a new name record in Abacus, that can also, I'm going to go here to Matters, Intake Forms, and Intake Form Manager. And in Abacus is the ability to design your intake forms. right? And an intake form can also be designed as a, or in a web page format. The advantage is somebody could go to your website, create a, or complete an intake form and click submit, and then in the Abacus program, you receive that information as a completed form. And when you do that, let's take a look at one of these. If I'm going to click edit here to open up the intake form designer, this is where you can actually select web as the output format. So you can even take an existing intake form, let's say it's a new contact record or something like that, save it as a web version, and then I would work with our team here to kind of configure it correctly that first time, and then going forward, all of those submissions, meaning the completed web forms that are sent to you, arrive via an email address that we set up for that purpose. The advantage then is you get to review, or you have the functionality of reviewing those web form submissions, cleaning them up, deleting any that are junk or not useful. But the ideal, the ideal scenario would be you receive those, those web form submissions, you validate them, and then with another click, you enter that information directly into your active database. So it's a nice way of having that integration built directly into your website, whether it's for lead generation or contact information, or even kind of a complex data entry process that you can actually kind of shift over to the client who has the firsthand information or firsthand access to the information. Behind a password or something like that, you can create a web form that captures that information and then is delivered or sent to you as encrypted data that comes in via web page or via an email address specific to that purpose. Okay. So that was another one of the questions, kind of in the import, how do I bring information in category. Okay. Now, the next step has to do with linking of emails, and this has become a must-have for a lot of clients. The advantage being that once you associate an email with the case, it's no longer isolated in one individual's inbox. Instead, we all have access to it, both as an archive and something we can bill for accurately and easily. And the information is also accessible. So I can reply or forward to a previously linked email by a colleague, even if I wasn't the original recipient. Right? So email linking is important, but the question was, well, how do we set this up? So I want to show you in the File Setup User Preferences, printing an email. You set up first, that Outlook is in fact your email program, and here's where the Outlook add-in setup is. So I can click that and then very quickly know for my user account, there's some other kind of controls to really help basically control how in Outlook you're given the tools that you need to take incoming messages and outgoing messages and very quickly and easily link them to a case. And this is where you would enable the add-in. Once that process is complete, and never hesitate to reach out to our client services department. They can walk you through this very quickly and easily. But once that process is complete in Outlook, the Abacus add-in is initiated, and I get those toolbar buttons, where not only can I take an incoming message and quickly link it to the appropriate case and client in Abacus, but I can manage incoming documents as file attachments to that email. I can very quickly enter my time and bill for it. There's a lot of core functionality in that Abacus add-in in Outlook but at its most basic level, it helps you take an incoming message, copy, store it, and associate it with the case file in Abacus. So that's how you link your emails, and we're happy to set that up for you. You set it up once, and then you have those tools immediately in your Outlook inbox. Okay. The next one is there a way to have Abacus contacts on my iPhone? It's a great question. The short answer is absolutely yes. The synchronization tool is what you would want to enable. And similar to linking your emails from Outlook, we have a nice connector, this Outlook Sync, that you could set up. What it does, you enable it once with a check, right? You have it happen, you have it work on your schedule, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, every half hour, however often you want that to occur. But the name can be synced. So if you want to go both directions, one direction, you have that control. So your contacts would be the names component of the Outlook Sync. And that's the best way actually to end up with your contacts on your iPhone, right? It's through Outlook. So your phone can synchronize with Outlook, and Abacus will synchronize with Outlook, both for calendar events and your contacts. Right? That's a good way to make sure you have that real-time information. So if you create a new contact on the phone, it'll appear, back in Outlook and then in Abacus, and of course, your contacts that exist in Abacus will then be available on your phone. Okay, and then an additional question specific to that sync was to or pertain to the event, right? And when the question was, well, what if I want Abacus to control the events that show up in Outlook? Because I think the question was that Outlook was kind of preserving or overwriting some of the new information or modifications that may have been entered into the Abacus system. So that's where the sync method, you can have changes go in both directions or only transfer from Abacus to Outlook. So that's something where, I would recommend if it's behaving in a way that you don't expect it to, certainly call our client services department immediately. But when you're setting up your Outlook integration, under the Events tab in that sync tool is where you can kind of determine very quickly how best to, or exactly the method, how you want it, whether it's bidirectional or just one way. Okay, perfect. So that's the Outlook integration. Moving forward, there was a question about the dashboard, and the dashboard is an interesting component of the program because it really is your way of having information of whatever type presented to you. It's kind of told to you rather than you needing to go out and find it. But the real question was, well, okay, that's great. I understand that value, but how do I actually change a pie chart to show me what I want it to show me? So I wanted to show you very quickly the settings on that pie chart app or widget that I added to this dashboard layout. If you click on settings, this is where you can name it, so you have some context, and then you can apply a query. And the query is what's used in Abacus to actually filter or establish the criteria of information, or let's say of matching records, and then information from those records is what's pulled and displayed in your chart. So the settings are exactly where you would go to do what you were requesting. The query ID is the first step. That's kind of filtering to make sure that the records that you want are just those records that information is pulled from. And then similar to creating a report in the Abacus system, the index is how the information is organized and sorted for you, and the group expression and code type is where or what type of information is displayed. So the settings for that app, that pie chart that I selected here, the chart, is exactly how you can change the category, right? So specifically, and reach out to client services or a ProServe department because they do this on a daily basis. And whether it's training you, showing you how to do it, or creating an app for you, those are things that we do for clients all the time because we understand your time is valuable, and being able to say exactly what you want and then have us build it for you maybe is more efficient. But there's also these settings that I'm showing you here on screen are part of the program. So they're the tools we would use to create that pie chart, but they're also available to you if you want to explore and get a sense of how you can use them as well. Okay. The next question I think is also important, and that has to do with using rules in the calendar. So it's a kind of straightforward question. How do I add rules, right? Or how do I use rules? And the easiest way is if I'm in the calendar, I can right-click and add events from a rule. Right? What this really does is it creates the rule by using the rule's what code or the rule name in the what code for the starting event. So Abacus, if you say add events from a rule, Abacus, the rules list is presented to you. You could select one of those, and anytime I select one, you'll notice, I'll click time here, it actually is entered in the what code. So if you know the rule what code, you can enter it directly into an event, or I can right-click in the calendar and select from the rule list. But the what code that corresponds to that rule is how you link a rule to an event so that the corresponding dates auto-populate. That was a specific question. So it's that what code that corresponds to the rule that really is the trigger in the system. Okay. The next question, and this is probably the last of the online or email submissions, and then I'll move on to some of the live questions that came up today. And it has to do with search. So how do we search when we have a specific matter up? And really the question is looking in documents for that matter, for a specific keyword. So if I pull up a case file and I click on docs, I have a nice list of all the documents that I've entered or my colleagues have entered, they're categorized and they're date stamped, so I can sort, kind of find what I'm looking for, and double clicking on any one of these will open it in the program that that my system is configured to use to display a Word doc, or it opens up in Word, PDF, so on and so on. Now, the real question, though, is how do I search within the documents for, what was the term? Municipal was the term that came up. This search box at the top of the Docs tab on each case file is where you would go to type in municipal and have Abacus search the contents of all these documents and show you a subset of documents that have that matching search term. So right there, that's your your starting point. The question was specific to a case. So cases, or the search here would only, or it's already filtered, I should say, for these documents that are specific to the case file. Right? Now, building on that concept, if you wanted to go and do a similar search, I wanted a document browse to pull up the document manager. This is where I can actually search for the term municipal, let's say, and look in all documents that are linked across all of my matters. So it's kind of two ways of doing that, whether it's the document manager and I'm searching throughout all documents, or, and more specific to the question that came in, on this case file, we could have hundreds of documents, thousands of documents potentially. Being able to use this search bar means that the content is full text search within all of these documents specific to the case file. Okay. Perfect. So here's another one. So this came up during our session today. Is there a way to archive files? This is actually similar to one of the ones that came in via email, but yeah, it's whether you can archive or whether you can search archive files in the system. So absolutely. And on each matter, one of the easier ways to do it is we have a case closed field. So when there is a value, meaning case closed is not empty, that is a query that you can apply to your system, right? So if I'm looking at my matters list, these are all of my cases. The query would become a nice way for it to do exactly what you just described. If I only wanted to see open cases, this would mean cases where the closed date field is empty. I would select that, apply it as a query, and then all of a sudden I'm looking at a shorter list where those archived cases are still stored in Abacus. I can access them if I need to going forward, but for conflict checks purposes or being able to, just have the peace of mind knowing that I'm not far away from those archived cases, but I'm not needing to scroll past them every day, the query, that open only cases query is the best way for you. And what I would recommend is in your user preferences, have this query be your default, which means in the program, when you're kind of navigating around or you're looking at your list of matters, the closed or archived matters, both, or in matters you can use the same process for names as well, they would simply be omitted from your list automatically, but they'd still be there, So and I think the additional question, or one that I remember that came in, was using that type of functionality to also filter out calendar activities that that are associated with an archived case, because what you really want to see is just information for active cases. So using that query, the open query both in matters and in names and in the calendar would be the most efficient way to really filter what you're displaying at any given time only to active and ongoing cases. Okay. All right, next step. This goes to customization, and I'm getting the flashing red light here because we're getting towards the end of our time. But this is the first of our AMAs, and I think this is something that will continue going forward because these types of questions I think are very important, and they also kind of tease out some of the value of the system. And so the last question I'll touch on has to do with customization. And there's the understanding that if I'm opening a matter here, and let's say I have an Abacus practice area legal solution for litigation, as I arrow through my cases here, you'll notice that the actual interface can vary greatly on a case-by-case basis. But the real question is, well, what if I want to add a field to my my screen? So in Abacus, we have our screen design tool. And so I went to Windows, Screens, select a screen, and this is where I have a list of all of my screens. So if this is a civil litigation matter that I'm looking at now, if I click Edit, it opens up that screen design in Screen Designer. That is a built-in component of Abacus, and it gives you the ability to come in to your name, matter, and even event records and add a field. All right? So if I click Add a Field, I now can roll through my field properties. I click Done. I've now added a field to that screen. Going forward, anybody who opens up a litigation screen in the firm's Abacus system would have this brand new field. You can add text. You can add variable text. So that's the way that we would do those view only. You can add a list box, hyperlink. There are a lot of ways to control, what fields are displayed. And, kind of following up on what we were talking about earlier, you are also able to come in, select fields, and remove them at any time. Right? If you want to delete these, yes, I do. And so this is really the control or the tool you have within the program to modify, customize, and ultimately enhance how information is captured, how it's displayed, and going back full circle to the original question that we touched on, whether it's read-only or whether it's whether you can modify it. So hopefully this has been useful. We're at the very end of our time. So I appreciate everyone's questions and look forward, check your email for further invitations to AMA webinars and some of the other kind of useful information sessions we'll have. And also I wanted to point out, never hesitate, visit the website and give our client support team a call, because they are trained professionals. They know the program very, very well, subject matter experts, and we are your technology partner. So give us a call. Anytime you have specific questions, even if you're in the midst of doing something you want to know, what are your options? How can I do X, Y, Z? Whether to filter or report or import or customize, all the things we covered today. Reach out. We're here, and we're looking forward to further questions. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and I appreciate your time, and I'll meet with you next time.